Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Emily Moyer and this is Strange Mosaic. And before we get started today, I just want to remind you, you are all listening to this on the Off Planet Media YouTube channel. Make sure to also go over and subscribe to the Emily Moyer YouTube channel. You will find all of my work there. Some of my work will continue to appear here on the Off Planet Media channel, but all of my work will be on the Emily Moyer channel and everything will always appear there before it appears here. So please go ahead and do that and we will move on with the show. Niish from Nox Mente, The Obelisk, and I think her new show is called The Cosmic Salon, correct?
Yes.
Is here with me today. And actually, Niish and I haven't really gotten a chance to talk, I don't think since the last time she was on the show with Jerry and with Randy and I don't think we've actually had anything more than texts. And so this could be a really interesting conversation because usually we talk more in the background and whatnot, but now we can just capture all that spontaneity on the recording here. Niish, welcome back. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. We have talked just barely, Emily and I just stay in touch, but yeah, we haven't had an in-depth conversation since then, Em, and it's definitely time. I'm so excited about this new show.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm kind of doing a lot of different things right now as I sort of since I'm flying solo, as I feel out what that's going to be. I mean, I'm still collaborating with a lot of people, with Robert, with Danny, and I have this ongoing new collaboration that I've been doing with Michael Wan. That's amazing. I don't know if you've been able to catch that yet. That's super fun.
No.
Yeah, we're doing, we have a show called Project Kids. And
I have seen your videos, or I've seen it out. I'm not sure where, but it's in my head.
Yeah, and it's he and I, he popped up at one of the first conspiracy cocktails. Steve Mercer put that up, and he's like, I think you guys will really gel. And I wasn't familiar with his work at all. He showed up. It went right into sync. And then we had him on an Off Planet Radio show with both Randy and I, and that went well. And he just was, he was like, I'm going through some interesting transitions in my life, and you brought some things to my attention. Let's do some ongoing shows while I go through this. And I was like, okay. And so we just have we get into some of I think the stuff that really people, once they've done the deep dive on what projects and mind control really are.
The basics, yeah.
Well, once they've done that and they're past all the, the forward-facing stuff, both the mainstream forward-facing stuff and the alternative forward-facing stuff, and they want the real weird personal oddities that aren't even necessarily so scary, but just weird, right? That's sort of where we're going and getting into, and it's fun, dude. People have cool. I'm getting the most interesting responses from this, as opposed to the kind of responses that I would get when I would do a show with, when we would do a show with Duncan, or when I would do a show with Elisa or whatever, who have their information is so important, but it's more, trying to educate people on the darkness of what it is, but there's other stuff underneath that's actually more interesting. And,
yes.
And actually in those conversations are the tools to our path out of this nonsense.
Yes.
Right? And so it's super fun. So, yeah.
This is how it's everything structured for me. It's more, let's just have natural conversations and see where things go. There's almost an expectation that anyone that kind of comes to us has an idea already of all the basic stuff. They enter the house knowing what the house is. And so now we're showing rooms, come into this room and let's sit down and chat about this dynamic.
Yeah.
So,
and then getting down to cracks in the walls.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, everything. Absolutely. And we're talking plaster and lath.
Absolutely. Yeah. So so this is just kind of the thing, my new sort of solo kind of thing, where I guess in some ways it continues some of the strangeness of some of the topics from Off Planet Radio, but is maybe a little bit more conversational and a little bit more in my personal style, So you're the second guest. So
oh, I'm honored. Thank you. Yeah, I had no idea. I'm really thrilled about this, and that sound is me pouring more tea, by the way, and I'm just super thrilled, and I know it's going to be a grand success. This is really what I think people want. They want They want to be part of these naturalistic flows. And I mean, that's how Jerry and I have kind of morphed Nox Mente as well. It's the obelisk and Nox Mente are kind of interwoven now, and it's just where it goes. We get there, we just say hello and start going. There's no there's no preamble to it.
But I did forget to tell you before we got started, because we just jumped right in. I'm still doing like the split thing, so we'll amble for a little bit, and then when it naturally comes to a transition point, we'll switch over to the patron side and ramble on some more. So
yes,
I didn't even tell you how we do this. Right? So
I'm a pro, though. I'm so used to it.
All right, cool. So you just, before we kind of get into we're going to start sort of in your domain, which is the place of sleep and dreams, and then just go wherever it goes. But before we do that, you've talked about Nox Mente, you've talked a little about Obelisk. I think most of our listeners are familiar with both of those shows. What they might not be familiar with is your solo project. So why don't you tell people about that real quick?
Yes, it's been in the works for a year, and it's taken me, because I don't know the tech in, so I've had to learn, and I've got a whole new studio. I've got new equipment for it. I'm able to do the mixer and take live calls. So it's called the Cosmic Salon. Is the general is basically what it is, but it has subsections. So I have a section called Psychic Eye, where I am taking some of my interpretations from information and passing them forward. And so those are just general little segments. They're already on my Niish Chan, three of them. One is not, if you just hit the channel, like the playlist, you'll get the ones. There's one right now that is it's private, or what do they call it? Invisible. But if you listen in, it plays. I don't know what that setting is called, but you can't see it. It just auto plays. Okay. And so, but the Cosmic Salon in and of itself is this. It's conversations with interesting people hashing out interesting things. And I've been wanting to do, like I said, I've been wanting to do it a while. One of the goals for me is, because I've made no money, and it's a big deal because I'm an artist, and so it's always gig to gig anyway. Mm-hmm. And I gave up with that with Nox Mente, and I Emily. So that's actually how I started this. It's like, I need to start maybe trying to get some AdSense money, and that's where it just bloomed from there. Like, oh wow, I can just do whatever I want, and what I want is conversations with interesting people on hopefully I stay on the YouTube platform. That way I can keep it where it is, and also get a little something. I started a Patreon. I've got it up, but I've never put it out there. This is where I need help from my friends, because your time is worth something, and I've always been terrible at this, and so I'm fighting myself putting it out there. And this is like, I need therapy to do that, Em.
It's so interesting you bring that up. I maybe struggle with like the same thing. Obviously we've been doing the Patreon thing. Randy and I were together, and now we're each doing it sort of separately. And I have a certain level of comfort with that. But in terms of like, people are like, why don't you get some sponsors and whatever? And it's a hard, even though it's in a much different way than you. I consider myself an artist too, obviously with the dancing, but that's not what people see with my media presentation. But there is, even though I do a lot of different topics that I kind of talk about, like the way that I'm piecing them together and the way my mind works is sort of my own. It's like you're watching me, the way the inner workings of my mind work. And it is kind of a form of, performance, like us, you know what I mean? I'm not, when I say performance, I don't mean that I'm making things up or whatever, right? But it's an art, just like you spend time, deciding how you want the colors and stuff to blend together on your, canvas when you do your paintings or in your videos or whatever, right? Like, like for me, some of it is that as well. Like, what things do I want to bring forward? And sometimes people can see how they connect, and sometimes they can't until later and whatnot. So I have a hard time. This is like my inner thoughts and my inner work that I'm putting out. And it's hard for me to go, okay, and I'm going to have a commercial for something I don't believe in play before.
Oh, I know.
And so then it's like, okay, well, what I could approach people who do have products or services that I believe in, right? And see if they would like to sponsor. But a lot of them, like, they're operating on shoestring budgets as well.
Yes.
Right? So they don't have a lot of money for that. So then it's like, okay, I'm just promoting something I like, and maybe you get it. Like, there's this deodorant that I use that I really love. And I love I love when you order from them, they always include a personal note and free samples. And
yeah,
she's like, oh, I used to live where you live. I miss the weather, but I don't miss the people. And blah, blah, blah. She's very friendly. So like, there's a part of me that's like, okay, I want to ask her. Maybe I'll just do that. And maybe, I can, there can be a coupon code for my listeners, and I'll just get free deodorant. And so then it's also in some ways like bartering, which I do believe in, but also it's a challenge. Just, like everyone needs to make a living, you know what I mean? And also, like, our work is so personal to us that it's hard to put a price on it or whatever, but our time is worth something. It's very challenging. And I think that, that's this is not any different in some ways than a small business. It's just
it's the same thing. Yeah.
More personal.
Yeah. This is what everyone says, and it's a strange time, because it seems like, I know you have to, if you haven't noticed, you should put your eye out and notice, because of the way the turn we've taken collectively. There are now it's a whole new crop, almost like weeds, of podcasts. It's like everyone has a podcast, and some of the newer ones are really fantastic, and they will rise up and the others won't. But it's just like, all of a sudden, it more than ever, there's just so many. And I don't even know what to say. I think there's enough room for everyone always with anything, because I believe in that whole kind of survival thing. Like, what people want, they'll get, they're going to listen to. The ears, the words find the people. And so, but it makes it even more, for me, it's another one of those things where it's like, I kind of hang my head. It's why I stopped showing oil paintings, because I started to see terrible oil paintings being pushed in local markets and local galleries and online. And here I am. If you've never been up close to one of my paintings, I don't do them. Something in me, they come from something in me, but I am well trained. I want to put it there. I'm well trained. I was trained in classical painting. And so they're well done, and anyone can come to them and see that. But you can have an experience with my paintings, and they're not thin. I use real products. I use a lot of real products. And I go out and I see everything I see is super thin washes, and you can see the canvas under it, and it's $3,000. The line work's terrible. It's just like, did they spend 5 minutes and throw this out? There's no thought. What are these symbols? How are they connecting? All that stuff. And so I stopped showing him. And I'm getting to that point almost now, but starting with doing this, but starting the Cosmic Salon is giving me a second wind, and all the people out there that reach out to me have given me will to move forward, because that's what I'm saying is, I look out and there's just a million now podcasts, and they're copying your style, they're copying my style, they're copying our like established styles, and you can see it clearly. And I don't care. I don't own it. I don't TM it. I'm a free open source person. So, here you are. Here you are. You've arrived. Do it to these people. And but it makes me put my head down in.
There's nothing like the original, right? Like none of those people sound like you, right? None of those people, do the weird whatever it is the fuck that I do it like that, right? Like, right. I can always tell, like, for me, like, obviously a lot of the way that, like, I feel things and pull things in is through the portal of electronic music, right? And
yes,
especially with dance music, a lot of it is DJs playing the same tracks, right?
yes,
There are certain DJs I really like, and even though they may play some of the exact same tracks as other people, when it's a certain of my preferred DJs, I can tell just a few seconds into listening that it's them. Right?
yes,
You know what I mean? And there's other people who may copy their style, or the same thing happens like with tennis. Like, right, obviously I love to watch tennis, and like there's a player named Grigor Dimitrov who they call him like baby Federer, right? Because his style is so similar, right? But if you just, if all I could see was the way the arm was hitting the ball and nothing else about the body, I would be able to tell immediately that it was not. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, you can't replicate, like even with, maybe with a deep fake, I don't know. But I do want to ask you about like what you said about some of these new podcasts coming out, right? So first of all, for those of us who have been, like, we're an interesting generation because we had many years of consuming information through the internet before we started putting information out. So we were definitely influenced by some people and have like a lot of that we draw from, and I think most of us try and do a really good job, not all of us, but most of us try and do a good job crediting the people whose work we're drawing inspiration from.
Absolutely.
Or like whose style of thinking about it. Like, we try and do a really good job with that. And then what's interesting about us is the way we sort of digested it, let it swim around, and then the way it came back out, right? Like with our own, unique sort of spin on it, right? Or a unique sort of perspective that's maybe a little different than, the original just hard research, the way it was interpreted, right? Like,
yes,
in your case, like you apply a very sort of artistic, and dream influenced spin to the information you take in. And for me, I take a very psychedelic, metaphysical, and also kinesthetic perception of it, you know what I mean? And put it back out and whatnot, which is kind of like how DJs do their art, right? They're like playing other people's music, but with their own sense of what it would sound good with, and what elements to highlight in the music, and what elements to play down a bit, and all that kind of stuff, right? So it's been kind of like that. And now it feels to me that, like what you're talking about, some of these new generations of video makers and podcasters, it's a little bit closer to like auto-tune, or like, you know how they have the programs where you don't have to know how to beat match anymore.
I know.
For you. Right.
Oh, it just makes me sad hearing it. Jeez. Yeah.
And it's one of those things that I'm with you. Like, I agree. These people have their right to be here, and some of them occasionally do something interesting. And it's also interesting to take in what they're doing and sort of roll it back out through our own perspectives. But one of the things, I only have so much time in a day to take in information, and you're probably the same, that I've largely chosen to ignore a certain group that came up at a certain time, right? Like a certain group of people, some of them are podcasters and some of them are more just video makers.
Yeah.
I think are really good at like synthesizing information, but don't ever do any original research, nor do they have a particularly unique perception. They just have, like, because there's so much information available and they've been able to hear it talked about by so many people in so many different ways, the first generation, the second generation, now they've gotten really good at just putting nice videos together that sound really polished, where we were sort of figuring things out on the fly.
We're gonzo, yeah.
Yeah, so like their stuff is pretty polished, and they don't often credit the original sources, right?
Most often.
Right? They don't claim it's their own unique research, but they don't tell you where to go and dig deeper. Like they don't tell you this, and a lot of these people sort of came up during the QAnon rise, right?
Yes,
and it doesn't mean to say that they're all bad, or that there's something, some of them I think were sort of given an artificial lift, right? But not all of them. But that's been largely my criticism of the whole Q thing as well, is that I have lots of criticisms. One of them is that Q will just say, like, put out some information that you and I may agree is true, right? But not point back to where this information originates from.
Yeah.
The researcher that did years and years of digging and had their livelihood threatened because, or whatever, or gave up a career where they were making
or money, died, or was, suicided.
All that kind of stuff. Never points back to that. Never does any of that, right?
Yeah.
Never says, like, this blah, 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 and go look here for more, right? Never credits that. And then also like just this, you know, obviously the hopium and the corruption of values in terms of being willing to accept people who've been like this idea that like people who've been like in hiding and lying to us about who they are, where they are now going to be the saviors kind of crap. It's like a real corruption of things. But to stay more with what we're talking about, it's just like a synthesis, right? Like it isn't really any unique perspective on anything, but it's really well put together, so easier to share with people who like, you know, don't have a lot of patience or willingness to go look at things or think about things for themselves. And unfortunately, to understand what you're talking about, or what, maybe not unfortunately, or what I'm talking about, and certainly what the people who came before us were talking about, that requires listening for hours and hours or reading for hours and hours. And I think people's attention span has become really short.
Yes.
You know? And so, and also, you know, and this goes for other cultures besides the podcasting area, that sort of fringe between mainstream and slightly alternative has really hijacked everything from the underground and presented stuff that is not underground with a little bit of an underground edge.
Yes.
Right? Whereas what you do and what we do, it's the underground. I'm not really.
We're the underground. We're definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
Everything's flash, and that's what this new crop is all about, and they understand everything's flash. Mm-hmm. So they're putting these shows together, and it's flash. They understand that's where everyone has now been geoengineered to, you know, 3 minutes is a lot. Mm-hmm. And so you get flash information with the video, with, you know, it's all just like this constant more. What it is, Emily, to me, when I observe some of this stuff, is it's more hypnotic indoctrination into stuff. And they're not even, I'm not suggesting that some of these people understand what they're doing, but they're doing it.
Yep. Yeah, there's one, I'm not going to say their name because I actually think some of their videos are pretty good. You know, like in terms of like, there isn't bullshit in there. There's some issues that we talked about, but there's nothing in there that isn't true. And so sometimes when you are trying to explain a really complex topic to somebody in just a few minutes, it's good to share these people's video. But there's one person in particular I can think of that the tone of voice sounds exactly like some of the hypnotic recordings that were played to me as a kid.
Yes. Oh yeah. I think I may know who you're talking about. Yeah. Oh yeah. This was, you know, we talked about this last night, and it's out there, and this new crop, you know, one of the things that I should have known this. I didn't think about it. It just occurred to me. And this week was, wow, okay, so all the Zoomers that are hitting 20 now, right? It was like around 20 years ago that all of the immunizations started to increase to what now, 86 immunizations for children now. Like when I was little, I think it was like 6 or something. I remember hitting 12 and it was a big deal and everyone was freaking out. So it's interesting to look at when all of a sudden we loop back. When did they start really over immunizing babies? And now how old are those babies? They're the Zoomers.
Just literally the amount of metal in your body, right? Makes you more sensitive to the frequencies, makes you more in a more symbiotic relationship with the technology, and that eventually begins to play out in the way you speak and the way you express yourself and the things you're attracted to, all that jazz.
Well, you know, I haven't gone deep into thinking about it too much, but it really just struck me yesterday. I'd seen a couple things via Twitter where, you know, some people were, you know, there's a lot of Gen X bashing and boomer bashing. And then I saw something on the Zoomers, and for people that generalize, and it was this cross section of hundreds of them that have been identified at some of these some of the rioting that's going on, and then someone put together stuff from their personal social media stuff, and they're all, a lot of them are LARPers, or cosplay, and identify as potato chips and unicorns and all this stuff. And it was actually really one of those moments for me where it was like, okay, wait, all this immunization started here. These people are this age. They got, sadly, in the state we are now, contract traced into, identified in these riots. And now here is their personal bios somebody has put out and made just an amazing video of, here's the generation that is tearing everything down.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, this is, of course, they're being, we understand a lot of this hidden hand here that reaches up to the obvious people. We know who they are. It is just something to, I don't want to lose the ball here, and the ball is on those 20-year-olds, 18, 20, 21, 23, 17. And when did gene therapy start? When did the new variety of immunizations actually start, Emily?
I'm so glad to hear you say gene therapy, because I use that term a lot when I'm describing these things, because I think actually
that's what's happening.
Well, my feeling is, like, you and I, because we're about the same age, we are the same age.
Yeah.
I think that that's largely what a lot of the projects with us were based around, was gene therapy, and the things that they learned from trying it on a smaller number of people, now it's on mass rollout and at a higher frequency and dosage and whatnot than that, right? Because
it's perfected. They've really perfected it.
Yeah, because some of these things, some of these issues with these young kids, I see some of that possibility for that tendency sometimes in myself, right?
Oh, absolutely. That's how you notice it in the outer world. You notice it because it's in you as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, when I really started to understand my own symbiosis with artificial intelligence and the technology vis-a-vis electronic dance music, and some of the internal experiences I was having that just were a little too, like, kind of like one of these videos we're talking about, a little too slick and smooth for me to buy that this was just completely an organic emission of my own mind every time, right? And I started to really look into the relation, that aspect of things, right? Like, is there an aspect of the internet that is inside of me? And I don't mean the natural, holistic, telepathic internet that we all, have the ability to access, that we've been lied to about. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the one that includes Facebook and all this other, and DeviantArt and Tumblr and blah, 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 and all this other nonsense, because those things were showing up in what should have been my own internal space in a way that wasn't natural, right?
Yes.
And so when I see this behavior, like, but it was like, for me, I was recognizing that this was coming in a little bit sometimes, and it wasn't my natural state. So through discernment and enough, research and sitting with myself and whatnot, I was able to sort out what it was, right? But these kids, it's been exposed at a much greater level, and they have no idea about the things that we know about, right? And so it's crazy. So I just had this thought while you were talking about the people who are tearing things down, that, like, one of the things that, forget about the history and all that kind of stuff, because I'm going to go out on a limb and say that at least more than 50% of people who are protesters don't actually know anything about history.
Clearly.
Like, I could see how they could take offense at something like a statue because it's static. They're used to looking at images that morph and shift and change and whatever, that are holographic in nature or digital in nature or whatnot. And so the idea that there's something that stands there and doesn't do anything, that doesn't shift according to your command, could be offensive to some part of their brain that's been entrained to this, virtual reality that is, not just coming, but has been here for a while. Like, I watched my nephew once. We went to the Natural History Museum, and he's 6 now, but he was like 3 or 4 at the time. right? So he's already been exposed to iPad and stuff like that, right? So they have these displays where you push a button and something about the display changes, right? And we went to one of the displays and it wasn't working. So he's pushing the button and nothing's happening and he's getting pissed, right? And he's like pounding at it, you know what I mean? And like almost gonna cry because he can't make something change form.
Yeah, I mean, that's where we are, and that's how everything is. Did I lose you?
It sounded like you went away for a second. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I was just moving because there seems to be a lot of traffic today.
Ah.
Okay. So continue with him expecting, basically touch screen.
Right. So, yeah, like he when he pushed a button and nothing happened, he almost lost his mind, right? So he's used to pushing a button and then seeing something move and shift and change and have, or whatever, right? And when we got to one display that was broken and it wouldn't do that, like he starts pounding on it and then he starts getting antsy and upset and mad and agitated. The 3-year-old version of a riot, right? Like, that kind of thing, and so it's just interesting to think about, like, the big takeaway from what's happening right now is they're tearing down statues. And statues are solid things that are static, that don't move, that don't change shape. Over hundreds of years, they may change color because their metal may, rust or turn to whatever kind of thing, or they may degrade a little bit, but they're not of a digital holographic morphing nature.
It's also should be stated with that too, that they're symbols but they're misguided in the fact that people that have no concept of what they're symbols of. So you see abolitionist statues getting torn down alongside right. Slave owner statues, yeah. And it's all being called racist. It's like, wait, pump the brake. This person was actually fighting against slavery, and it's just everything Victorian, essentially, and then anything that appears that way. So it's all tear down the old. And this is, again, lack of context, which is a very terrifying aspect. That's a terrifying world to live in. And if we're living in a world with no context, I mean, that's hard territory to navigate because you have nothing to stand on. You are floating, and anything can then push you asunder. And we need context. Context can change. It does change. It should change. But we need to stand on something. I need to understand when I get near a fire, there's a radius of heat. And then the closer I get, the hotter it gets. And then beyond that, I need to understand that I can throw my hand through the fire and be fine, back and forth. Everyone's done that, right? Through candles and stuff. And that the orange and yellow part of the flame actually doesn't hurt unless you hold it. But then what hurts is the blue part of the flame. Right. And that's what it eventually gets you. And that's what's doing the combustion. That's where all the magic's happening. And so that's context. And so
I think the combination of no context and then maybe this different way that the brain is working due to the technology and this sort of metals in the body, that the gene therapy and whatever, right? So you have like a certain like stimulate, like that like this idea, like the kids don't ever destroy the computers, right? Like they loot and they take the computers. On the computers, like information is malleable. Right?
Yes.
Like, pictures are malleable, they shift, they change. Things like statue and history seem static to them. And that is frustrating to the way their brain works, right? Because everything they've been presented with. And then you combine that with no context and not understanding anything about history. I mean, the lack of context is what cancel culture stands on, right?
Oh, absolutely.
All the people who've been canceled or in the process of being canceled or are going to be canceled, like they'll be canceled based on a sentence that makes them sound one way, where if you read the whole paragraph and certainly the entire book, you'd have a completely different opinion of what this person was communicating.
Right. It's the blue point of the flame. When I had that record contract, that was actually one of my songs, was the blue point of the flame, which was completely about this.
Huh.
Was that's because that's where the synthesis happens from one element to another. And you just described it beautifully. It's so for me, everything's exciting and it can be terrifying, but it's also exciting
Yeah.
because I'm kind of Neptunian like that.
Hmm.
However, oh, pardon me, that tea is coming up, girl. And however, this is this is the more important point here is the genome therapy and the fact that they have we're being changed slowly,
Hmm.
and it takes generations, and those of us in programs, and this is another almost bone of contention with me, even though I'm a very grounded person. I don't hold grudges or any of that, especially, but I everyone that comes forward saying I was in the programs, I'm so suspect of that, you know this. And then there are just certain things, this is where I love where like Shane comes from with some of it. It's like, you just know. And that stuff, all that work that was done prior has been perfected. And we look at generational shifts and that have foresight. Again, context, right? We're going to go from here to here. Now, how do we get from A to B? This is math. And obviously the people at point A do not want what's at point B. So we need to stretch out this apparent idea of time and space and uh, death rates, right? Turnover rates. We can even look at it in retail sense.
Yeah.
If you're breeding a dog and you want to get smaller, you just keep downbreeding and adding new genes, but you keep downbreeding the smaller ones and then adding new genes into it to keep the old ones healthy, and so you don't get problems. But eventually, a few generations down the road, you have a teacup poodle from what was once at one point the only poodle, which was a standard poodle.
Right.
So you've gone from 60 pounds to 3 pounds in generations. This is happening, and we're seeing this now.
People, yeah.
With people.
Yeah.
And this is a very important thing that's going on right now, and we're in the crux of it. And also, now that the electromagnetic foundation has been set, and everyone has paid for their slavery, because we all need, at this point, and I'm generalizing. I know there are lots of people that don't, and a lot of people that live with us, and a lot of people like me who I'm still half Luddite. However, all the new people that are coming on, except for the ones that have been intentionally held back and homeschooled and all this, are coming into that dynamic. They're being birthed out of wombs that have been electrified, and the genes have been changed in those people, and they're evolving, and they're able to process this information. The groundwork electromagnetically has been laid, and so we're having a sea change in that way. We're generations into this now, and if we think about what happened with the taking over of Tesla, it could have been that was one timeline, one path. That's not the path we took. And from that point on, if you look at it with long legs, again, generational, of how electricity works in this field that we're in this etheric field, it's masterful, and it's game on now, because now we have generations, we have 100 years of a slow transition from radio all the way up here to now the new platform. And that's where 5G is the new platform. 7G and above is where it gets really crazy, where now you can get turned on. We've all talked about this on all our shows. We are all aware of it. If you're if you're coming to these shows where you and I are talking, we're all aware of this stuff, so it doesn't need to be rehashed. So you can be remotely controlled now. We're basically, the new generations are becoming more cyborg without consent. It's just the way it is. Sorry, people. It is just the way it is. And so I did want to come, that was one of the things I was kind of entertaining, connecting with you in, was this, where we are with that. And we're seeing, what we're seeing is a lot of that. And so it's easy with, say, the riots at hand. As always, you get agitators, the group mentality or participation mystique, if you're Jungian, all that stuff always is easy to set in with groups. It's why it's easier to be, or it's prudent to be one that's not in the group, but maybe for what the group is standing for, whatever the group is, and not get caught up. If you're in the near the mosh pit, you end up moshing, right? It just happens. So if you're standing back and you're watching the concert from a distance, you're not in the mosh pit, but you're still technically around those energetics, and you get the show on stage, and you get all that periphery radius of people that are not in proximity to the mosh pit, which is where the magic's happening, which is where the blue point of the flame is. And so this is what we're seeing. This takeover, as some people want to call it, as some people want to say reset, this has long legs. We all know it, and it's game on. And then there are the deeper layers to this. There is the whole idea now that we have tapped into the idea. I want to put it out there first, the idea, because without the idea, nothing happens. And then the words play around that, and then the optics come around that. The idea of inner space and interdimensionality and intergalactic. Inner is the idea here, water, down in, within. And that's where we start introducing elements of that field, of those fields that come into play, like the stuff I brought forward to you and Randy originally with the octopi, right? And which is completely at play. That I can directly connect to the Black Eye Club. That's not adrenochrome. Those are entry points. And of course, the blood is the life. The blood adrenochrome stuff is ancient. It's not new. It still happens, and it's a big deal. But it is fractalized in a way that some people need the thought form to understand that it's not just what it appears to be. It's not just simply one solid bead of information. It's everywhere. It's fractalized. We're getting it in. You're getting that when you drink Mountain Dew. Sorry, you're getting it. It's in there. And they don't even hide it. That's the thing. It's not, it's in there, fetus genetics and stuff like that. It's in there. These labs are making sure that everyone is basically cannibalizing at this point.
Okay, you just said a lot of stuff, and there were so many things in there I wanted to address. So
that's why I paused.
I did the rare thing that I almost never take a note during the show because it distracts me. But that was a thick monologue there. So good job. Okay, I want to roll back to the gene therapy, because where I first started, looking into that, where it first resonated to me, where I first heard it, and I was like, oh my God, that's I didn't even have to, before I even looked into it, I intuitively knew that that's what it was with me, and that I just needed to look into this. It was in one of the intros for Fringe. If people ever want to do maybe we'll do this at Conspiracy Cocktails sometimes. It'll be good, right? If you go through all of the various intros of Fringe, I think there was over the course of the entire show somewhere between 6 and 10 different ones, and sometimes they use them interchangeably and whatnot. But in the intros, they have all these scientific ideas or metaphysical ideas, right? And if you research what each of those are, then you have been given completely the almost the expanse of issues that were being explored in projects that were ranging from the 50s up till now. And what you said about Tesla was interesting, right? Because Tesla died in the 40s, right? Did Tesla die in the 40s?
Yeah, and we could do a real quick lookup. He died in the last century at the beginning, before technical mid-century. So
yeah, I feel like it was
like at the
40s.
beginning of the mid-century movement.
Yeah, I feel like he died in the 40s, and then we start to see the beginning of Artichoke, Bluebird, MK Ultra then in the 50s, right? And really, a lot of it is largely based on things that are bastardizations. So he died in 1943. Okay, I was good. So we start to see these, like, you know,
I was just looking it up.
yeah, bastardized versions or off takes, like, right, sometimes there'd be some experimentation. I think the ways they came up with some of these techniques that they use in torture programs or mind control programs or whatever is they noticed that they were an unusual side effect of being in the field of certain kinds of electricity or energy, right? And they then highlighted on, like jumped on that and capitalized on that and sort of what do they call that, amplified those things, right? So they, like, basically, I think from the 50s until right up now, because there's still not a willingness to acknowledge in its entirety what Tesla's technology was and what the real point of it was, right? Like they've weaponized every possible, like, aspect of it out to the nth degree, right? Yes. And at this point, when obviously we've had more access to information and more of us were starting to understand it, then they do this brilliant move with Elon Musk of rolling out the car Tesla, yes, right? So that when people start searching Tesla, that's what they get. The young kids think Tesla is a car, mm-hmm, right? Or they think that free energy means that you have a battery that you have to recharge, which is complete bastardization of it, right? Like, and even, you know, like the cynicism with which it was done is, I don't know if you remember this, but like during some of the hurricanes and storms in Florida a couple of years back, Elon Musk tweeted out that so that everybody could get to higher ground, everyone's battery charges will last twice as long now. So they were remotely able to make people's batteries last longer, which tells you that they're artificially being restricted to keep people hooked into something.
Oh, right? Yes.
So that's so cynical, right? That's mm-hmm. It's just gross what's been done with that. So this is a complete, you know, bastardization of Tesla technology, right? So that's where we are. We still, you know, the technology of one person has kept projects and programs and governments and corporations deceiving the people for, at this point, 70 years, 80 years, right? And you know, so I think that's interesting.
But he got co-opted in the, like, 1919 or something, right around the turn of the last century.
At a certain point, I mean, I don't know exactly what parts of his technology development were while he was under influence and what parts are not, and how mm-hmm. they play with each other and whatnot. But I think what we have at a certain point is, you know, like, and this can be said for anybody, right? Like, people, you know, are doing an honest inquiry into science and magic and reality and whatever, and they discover something, and it's the powerful feeling when you realize, oh, I can make things happen, right? Mm-hmm. And it's, you know, I think for even the most well-intended, you know, kind-hearted people, right, over the course of their life, there is that part where they start to walk down a path where they're taking advantage of this power that they've learned that they have. And at a certain point with maturity, sometimes they're able to walk it back and others never are, right? Which, you know, people are able to sort of get control over their own you know, relationship with the power that, you know, the power that they realized that they had. I mean, that's available on a certain level to all of us. And I think, you know, that's part of the delicate balance of being human, right? You don't want to deny your own power, but you also have to be careful with how you wield it, right? and so I think he probably is no different than everyone else in that. And so I don't know, I can't say that I know at what point he went in a different direction. Did he ever start to walk that back? Where was he at with it all when he he died or taken out or whatever? And how did that also play into the way his information has been perverted? You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of a messy web.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. So, but anyway, if people ever just want to do an interesting study into understanding the crossover between magic and science, go look at all of those terms that are fed to you in the intros of all the various seasons of Fringe. And that's a great place to start in understanding what we're dealing with here. I remember I did that one night. I recognized, I'm like, this is some interesting shit that always flashes across my screen before everyone starts, right? I'm going to look up everything on the screen. All right. So
it's all important when you're looking at shows like this, every bit of it.
Yep. It's really, yeah. So, the next thing I wanted to say was that you brought up Shane and how, like, you get frustrated sometimes with people claiming to be products of projects or programs and, whatnot, and how they present themselves. And then you were talking about how you appreciated, like, the way Shane sort of.
We just had a wonderful show with him.
Well, I know you. Yeah.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
So I did something that I don't often do, which is I don't usually listen to the person's last media appearance before I have them on, because Shane was with me. Shane was the first guest on this show. But I had heard that after I had booked him, I had heard that you'd had him on the show, and I wanted to make sure that we didn't replicate a similar show.
Yeah.
So, because that possibility exists.
Right. Well, we're swimming in the same water, so.
Yeah, you were swimming in the same water, and then just, I'd say, like, the similar kind of combination of the way things are thought about by you and Jerry were similar to how Randy and I did it a little bit. Different, the same, right? So I wanted to make sure that, like, I didn't just talk about all the same things you guys did. So
but also you, Shane, and I are the real deal in these, this is what we know each other. Well,
yeah. What was interesting is, and by the way, that was a great show. I was glad I listened, because otherwise I may have replicated the show. There were so many things that you guys talked about that would have been on my list, and we still talked about some of them, but we brought up the conversations you guys had already had, so it just continued from there.
Oh, excellent. I'll have to check it out.
As opposed to just repeated the same things you guys had talked about. Yeah. But I have to say, so I've known Shane for several years personally. Like, we've talked behind the scenes. We've done a couple of shows together, but I've been on his podcast once, and I've done a show with him and Randy once, right? But this was the first time it was just like he and I on my kind of show. But when I was listening to you guys, I have to say I really appreciated it, because I think it was the first time I really got to see Shane without the people who were interviewing him. I can't count myself or Randy, because it's different when you're doing your own show with them or whatever, right? Yes. Having particular requirements of him that frame him in a certain way that makes it his true sort of, I don't know, like the way his mind works obscured for the view for someone like me, right? So we've had personal conversations. They tend to be more personal, but because you guys were talking about a lot of stuff that I might have with him, I got to see that, oh, this is really interesting. While he and I are very different in the way we present ourselves, like the way our mind work is actually very similar. Like the way what we do with the information we take in, and like all of the different sort of perspectives and knowledge that we use when we approach some of these topics seem to be very similar. You and I are the same. I already knew that about you. But so many people who've interviewed Shane, like they really take him down the Illuminati trail or the alien trail or like a certain aspect of the projects and programs trail. Yeah. It's almost like that's their requirement of them. They want him because there is something very genuine about him and like he knows what he's talking about. So if you can get him to validate your version of reality, then right? So that's what a lot of people have done. And it's been like, it's made it so that like, a lot of times listening to him on other people's podcast wasn't that interesting to me. People would be like, oh my God, it was so amazing. And I was like, I don't know. But when you guys talk, it was really, it was great. You know what I mean? It was like, I was, like I felt like I was just sitting listening to friends and we're all kind of sharing the same thing for a second and melding and whatever. And it was the first time I think I ever got to see just how his mind works without the people interviewing him having a requirement of him to fulfill some sort of confirmation of their preferred version of reality.
Yes. Yeah.
Good job.
It was so well. It's the way you and I get together. It's the way some of us get together. And I had never talked to Shane before, and I was not too familiar with much of his backlog. And so Jerry had booked him, and you know, I of course know his name and from your shows and stuff. So I knew he was out there, and I always felt like he was the true blue. But I didn't know until it was almost immediate. Like, you know, Emily, like it is with you and I, it was just, oh yeah. You just know. I don't know how to describe that for people. Yeah. And so it stands up as one of my favorite interactions. And again, we had never talked before that.
Yeah. No, I mean, this was kind of, this was a different experience for me talking with him. I mean, we did it a little on his podcast. I was on his podcast like maybe 6 weeks ago or something like that. But you know, that was more just, you know, interviewing of me or me talking about sort of my version of things or whatever. Right. And so, yeah, but it was really good. And I really enjoyed listening to it and listening to him. And, yeah, it was, I felt that same thing that you're talking about, you know, sort of with him, you know, and it continued into what I did. The next thing I wanted to say is I agree with you. A big thing I wanted to do with you today was dot connect. And I think we'll get into that, some of that dot connecting more in the second hour. But I wanted to address what you said about the mosh pit, right? Like, yes. I listened to an interview the other day. There's this guy named Michael Tracy, and I don't know if you've ever seen him. He's a political, he writes articles, and he used to be on some sort of subsidiary show of the Young Turks, but every once in a while he'll be interviewed like on Tucker Carlson or The Hill or something, because he was kind of he was very oppositional to the Russiagate narrative, right? Even though he's a leftist, you know, and pretty, you know, and pretty entrenched in the system, he was one of a handful of the honest leftist journalists that were just called bullshit on Russiagate, right? Mm-hmm. He was in Minneapolis and like last week or the week before, and had a just on the street interview with somebody who had been there the first night of the riots, right? And like, it was basically, you know, the title of the video was something like, "You can't believe mainstream hasn't picked up on this," right? And this was a kid who was talking about the very thing that you are saying, right? Like, so he lives in Minnesota, but not in Minneapolis, but happened to sort of be near Minneapolis and heard that these protests were going on, right? And it sounded like, oh, okay, like they're protesting police brutality. Something does, you know, the first few hours of the protests or day seem to be somewhat reasonable in nature, right?
Right, and focused.
If you take what they say happened as truth, which you have to until you have time to start to, you know, look at it or whatever. So it seemed to be reasonable in nature. So he thought, I'm going to go check this out. Like, there's some history happening right now, right? And I'm going to go check it out. And he went, and over the course of the next 24 hours, he got completely pulled into it to the point where he's like, yeah, like at a certain point, I was rioting. I can't believe I got caught up in it, right? So he went from, at first he was just observing, right? And then he went over there, and because of the energy of the mosh pit, he got pulled in and started perpetrating the rioting, right? Like, and it was all mixed in with other stuff for him. Like, there was people who were like, got stuck in burning buildings and couldn't breathe. So there's, you know, he was helping people, but also like breaking into places and taking stuff, right? You know, he called it peaceful. He even used the term peaceful rioting at one, well, no, peaceful looting, right? He called it not peaceful rioting, peaceful looting, right? Oh dear. So, but then, you know, I guess ultimately he ended up, his phone was dead. He got separated from his friends, and he ended up getting arrested because he slept in the police precinct that had been abandoned or something, right? And now it's like a month out from that, and in reflection, he's like, I can't believe it doesn't even make sense. He is having a hard time getting his head around it. And I think that goes to what you were talking about, right? Like that.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Thing with the mosh pit. And so people should go check it out. If I can find it again, I'll link to it. in the show notes. And it's kind of an aside from some of the topics we've been talking about here in the first hour. It may connect more to things in the second hour, but because of the way you described, like being near the mosh pit, and then even if you're what it looks like from there, and then viewing it from far away. So this guy's had all angles, right? Like he's heard about it on the radio, he got close, he watched, he got involved, and then now he's looking at it in retrospect, right? And all of it ignited by that sort of blue flame of magic that you're talking about, right? And he even describes what it looked like down there because of all the flame. He was like, it was, the whole area was lit up with this like bright orange. It was crazy. That was the first way he described it, was everything was all lit up. And he wasn't meaning just things were on fire. He meant the glow that it created, like made almost a surreal environment, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's so much to say, so much there to unpack. There's so much there to unpack. With all this, with all of this, it's, I mean, it just baffles me. And you know what's amazing on that note is when I've been trying to listen around, how many people are not connecting some of these dots, you know, and that's what frustrates me. And it makes, it inspires me to do art, you know. That's why I did 47 Bound, because no one's ever connected Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia, with cattle mutilations and the stuff in 19, she was a human cattle mutilation. Check it out, all the details are there, everything is there, and it was intentionally placed there. She's the hangman, and no one did it, so I had to do the video, and still I meet tons of resistance with it. However, that's a dot to connect.
I'm fairly familiar with the Elizabeth Short case and with the issue of cattle mutilations. But I would not have naturally thought to connect those two things. But yeah,
and place them and placing them
and place, yeah, and the way
1947 with the Nag Hammadi scripts and you know, the Babylon working and Roswell. And I mean, there's so much that went down.
Well, the cattle mutilations also connect to mad cow prion disease, mad cow disease, right? And that whole kind of issue, and the Nag Hammadi numbering also connects to the vaccinations and the Nagalase enzyme, right?
This is all connected, yes.
Yeah. I've talked about the connections between the cattle mutilation and the mad cow disease, and as well the Nagalase and the Nag Hammadi, and the enzymes being released into the body with vaccines and whatnot. So, all right. So
I just wanted, before we go into the second hour, and I guess as a teaser, so last night talking with David Whitehead, this was.
Oh, I love him. I was thinking about having him soon.
That was a fantastic show too. However, one of the things he postulated a question towards, you know, why now? And I'm constantly on this thing about checkpoints and with ritualistic stuff. Timing is everything. That's why this timing's everything. The astrological stuff is significant. The timing is significant, and it's lining up with a bunch of other stuff. And rituals have architecture to them. Spells have architecture to them. Big workings in a clock. Clocks have architecture to them. And so it now is the time. And so there's a dot there to connect. There's a many dots there to connect as to why now is this whole kind of awakening situation happening. And I'll leave it at that.
All right. So then that teases us into the second hour. I think we're going to talk about the ever-present octopi in our conversation, how it connects to the virus, to the riots, to the mining of cryptocurrency as the backing energy of all of that. I haven't even talked to you about that, but I have a feeling you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Right? All sorts of stuff. So stay tuned into the second hour. You can join us at patreon.com/offplanetmedia for that. And Nish, just remind people one more time where they can find all your work, and tell them what your Patreon is so they can go over there and support you.
I don't know my Patreon at the moment because it's not technically, I mean, it's out there, but I haven't put it out there. So I'll
link to it. You'll send it to me after the show.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I have to still set up like the whole thing. I might ask you for a question. I might ask you for help. Anyway, so it's noxmente.com, Jerry and I stuff that I'm so proud of with our obelisk, Noxmente, and it links to all the social media, all the places you can download. I'm Nish 13, two I's, Nish double ISH. 13 on Twitter, Nish 2I's 369 on Instagram, and my show, The Cosmic Salon, is going to be on my Nish personal channel, which if you go to the Noxmente, Vox's Nate channel on YouTube, it says your host, and you can click on Nish, and that's me.
Or you can also, I think it's the first, if you type in Nish on YouTube, you will recognize which I think there's one other Nish channel that's kind of near the top, but yours is the top one, I think, and you guys will recognize which one.
Oh, really? Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's me in a 18th century wig I made, so with the pink background.
Yeah. I think it's the top one. When I was looking today for something,
oh, nice. Usually there's so many niches, and it's like Nico from Velvet Underground. It's a guy's name. So you get all these guys, like these Indian guys from India. Yeah. But it's the middle part of my real name, and that's why I use it.
Yeah. All right, guys, we will see you on the other side. Stay with us.